Hello and welcome to Human Caring. Today I have a reappearing guest, Swami Kashi, for a conversation on different topics. Hello, Swami Kashi, and welcome.
Hi, Shlomy. Good to see you again. I always enjoy talking to you and brainstorming. Thank you for calling.
Thank you. Thank you. Swami Kashi, today, I don't know, I thought we can start with a subject and then see where it's going to take us. So I'm really curious about how do you see the role of the subconscious in our life, in our human life. Maybe you can tell something about it.
Yeah, well, technically, we can say that our mental faculty is divided into two. There are different ways to look at it. One way is to look at it as the mental faculty is divided into two. One is the conscious mind and one is the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is very sophisticated, but not very efficient. The subconscious mind is very efficient, but not very sophisticated. And I will try to explain it a little bit. When I learn something, the way to learn is through the conscious mind. The subconscious mind doesn't have the capacity to acquire new information and new skills and understand things and process things in a very complex way. Only the conscious mind is able to do it. But at the same time, in order to do things in a new way, in a new capacity, the conscious mind demands a lot of resources and it is not sustainable. And therefore, the conscious mind knows how to delegate responsibility that it's possible to shift to the subconscious mind in order to be able to do things in a more efficient, more, I would say, economical way. I will give an example that will make it, I think, very clear, is learning to drive. Right? Anyone who is driving a car has the experience the first time when you're in your first driving lesson, it is so difficult. You have to think about so many things simultaneously. You have to recognize the cars that coming in front and coming behind. You have the accelerator, the brake, the gear shift, the wheel, the winking, so many things you have to do simultaneously, everything together at the same time. And when you start in your first driving lesson, it is so difficult. Maybe after half an hour or 45 minutes of driving, you're exhausted and you didn't do so much. And today, after driving for whatever, 30 years, then I can drive for 3 hours, have a cup of coffee in my hands, listen to the radio, talk to the phone on the phone, and drive without any effort, and I'm fresh after 3 hours. How is it possible? In the first lesson, it was so difficult, and now it is so easy. Why? Because in the first lesson, I didn't have the skill, and I had to think about every activity. Every aspect of the driving, I had to do consciously, and this is very taxing to the mind. It takes a lot of resources, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And when I take the second lesson, the third lesson, slowly, I start to repeat actions. I start to do the same actions over and over again. And actually what happens, many of these activities are shifted from the conscious mind to the subconscious mind. And today when I'm driving, I think that maybe I can say that 90% of the driving is happening on a subconscious level. I don't need to think about moving my foot from the brake to the accelerator. It's not necessary. It is happening on a subconscious level. And because I don't need to think about it, because it is happening on a subconscious level, it is much more efficient. It doesn't need so much resources. And therefore, we, all our life, we learn things through the conscious mind, and slowly, slowly, as we repeat them, we delegate them to the subconscious mind. And to think about it realistically, almost, I will, definitely most of what we do, a greatest part of whatever we do in our life is happening on the subconscious level. Just think about it. You take a cup of coffee and sip. It is the simplest action, right? Lifting a cup of coffee and taking a sip. But on what level does it happen? Maybe there is a conscious part that decide I will now sip the coffee and drink. Sometimes even this is not there. But who decide which muscle will be contracted, which muscles will be released, elongated, what is the tonus of the muscles, what is the axis of the head? All these decisions, who is making them? I don't have to do it. And see a baby who is trying to do the same. If you give a cup of water to a baby and the baby tries to take it to its mouth, it will go all over the place and it will spill over, right? Because the baby has to do it on a conscious level. The baby doesn't have it already regulated on an automatic pilot. And therefore, even such simple activity that we do is happening mostly on a subconscious level. And in this sense, the subconscious is the greater, is like, if the mind is the iceberg, the conscious mind is the little tip above the water, and the subconscious mind is everything which is under the surface of the water. And of course, if we understand it in this way, we can recognize, first of all, that it is happening on many different levels, not only on the mechanical level that I described. It is happening on learning language, on thinking processes, on belief systems, on emotional responses. All this stuff is happening primarily in a subconscious mind, and much less to a lesser degree in the conscious level. And therefore, if we understand it and accept it in this way, we recognize that the subconscious mind is so important, and being able to understand it, work with it. You know, the subconscious mind has a different language. I will talk about it in a moment. That becomes very important. To work with our conscious mind is what we always do. But the work with our subconscious mind is where we many times fail, is where we can do more important work, and where if we understand the language and the mechanism of the subconscious mind, we can really bring a change into our lives. Another important point in this is that we all recognize that it's very difficult to make changes. I think we talked about it last time. It's very difficult to make changes in our lives. And the reason is that on a conscious level, we can make a change from one moment to another. It's very easy because this is the conscious mind, this is the thinking mind. This is where there is a lot of plasticity. But the subconscious mind is very rigid, is very slow, is holding things, it is working with habits and tendencies. And therefore, when we try to make changes, the subconscious mind is always pulling us back and not allowing us to make changes like the conscious mind is allowing us to. And therefore, people find it extremely difficult to make changes on all levels. And the good news of spirituality, of the ancient traditions of India and other places, is that if we gain understanding of the subconscious mind and the way it works, we can actually make this changing process much more efficient. Much more efficient. If we understand the subconscious mind, how does it work, then our capacity to bring a change is much greater. Now, I have mentioned about the language. When we are talking now on a conscious level, of course, there is a lot of subconscious content that is going on as we speak. But right now we are talking on a conscious level, and I'm thinking about what I'm saying, and what you're saying, and you think about what I'm saying. This is on a conscious level, and we have our language right now. It is English. Okay. When we talk about the subconscious mind also has a language, but this language is a little different. Subconscious mind doesn't speak the same language of the conscious mind. And many times we make mistakes. I will give just a couple of examples maybe. Suppose I want to deal with some tendency or something I have that disturb me. Yeah, here is my subconscious mind is going to enjoy a cup of coffee. Yeah, thank you. So let's say I have, this is example that I usually use. It is very useful, the idea of anger, right? A lot of people suffering from tendency to get angry, and everything is driving us crazy, and we find that it is very difficult to deal with this tendency, even if we want to become more accepting, more patient, more peaceful, more calm. We tend to lose it and get angry. And suppose I decide that I want to overcome my short temper and I want to avoid anger, which is definitely, as we already understand, is coming from the subconscious mind. It is a tendency that is rooted in the subconscious mind. Suppose I tell myself, I will not get angry. I will not get angry. And whatever I say, this is, we call it a suggestion or an auto-suggestion. We are giving a suggestion to the subconscious mind, but when I say I won't get angry, I don't want to be angry, I will never get angry, I should not get angry, the subconscious mind doesn't understand the negation. All the subconscious mind is hearing is anger, anger, angry, angry, anger. And it understands this is my job to get angry. And in this way, we have to learn the language of the subconscious mind and understand how does it talk. What is the language that is speaking to the subconscious mind? And by doing it correctly, we can really bring a change. I will give another example. I once talked to a group of addicts in a rehab center somewhere in the United States, in Oregon. And there is the 12-step, the AA thing. And they open their meetings by people introduce themselves, something like, hello, I'm Swami Kashi and I'm an addict. And then like this, everybody say, and I'm an addict and suffering from this. And I told them, if you, every time you say, I'm Swami Kashi and I'm an addict, what basically you tell your subconscious mind that its job is to make sure that you will be an addict. See, you are forcing the subconscious mind to hold you in that capacity of being addicted. And the manager of that project, he said, we have a problem that people live in denial. They come here and they say, the judge sent me and I have no problem, I'm perfectly okay, I'm not addict. And so the first thing we want them to acknowledge, to recognize there is a problem. Therefore, they say, you first have to admit, okay, I have a problem, recognize it. But I told him, I understand your point very well, but maybe you can just phrase it differently. Instead of saying, I am Swami Kashi and I'm an addict, you can say, I am Swami Kashi and I am on a recovery path. Is it not? It implies the same. It implies that there is a problem, but here, where is the focus now? What do I tell my subconscious mind? What is the mission on my subconscious mind now is the recovery. And the recovery is different than being an addict. So this is, I think, a beautiful example of how simple language and attention to small details can make a very big difference. Now, some people think that, you know, if I only imagine that I will be very rich, that will make me rich. And this is, I think, very simplistic, like fancy new agey stuff. I don't really buy into. I don't believe in it. I don't think that if I will tell myself I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich, that will make me rich. Abundance, abundance, abundance. That's not the point. The point is that our subconscious mind on the back room is working on different tendencies and fixations. And whatever you feed the subconscious mind, this will be the fixation. If you keep feeding the mind that you are recovering, then the subconscious mind, to its capacity, not in any magical way, not in any spiritual or something way, in a very simple way, our tendencies will direct us towards this path of recovery. On the other hand, if I constantly feed the subconscious mind on addiction and telling myself I'm an addict, I'm not good enough, I'm an addict, I have a problem, and all this, I am fixing this thing, and whatever mental processes will take place will go on this line. You see? So I'm not talking here about magics and about any new agey fantasies. I'm talking about the very basic psychology. If I believe that I'm a happy person and I'm fulfilled and I'm very strong and I can deal with everything, I'm convincing myself that this is the situation. When I face a challenge, I will see it in a particular way. On the other hand, if I convince my subconscious mind I am miserable, I am victim of society, I have so many troubles, life is not fair, so I will face the same thing. It's not that I will face different experiences. I will face, but my reaction to it will be completely different. My understanding of it will be completely different. And therefore, the whole situation will be taken differently, and my action will be different. When my action will be different, then I will take a different course, right? So ultimately, it will also affect the outside. Why? Because my actions, my reactions will be different, and that will take me on a different course, which eventually I believe will be better. Will be better, and therefore, going back to where I started with this, it is important to understand how the subconscious works, what its language, and how can we work with it. And then, of course, to walk the walk, to actually do it,
It's the way I understand what you're saying. You said a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of material in what you said, but I think, I think what I can see from what you said, that part of us, part of me, kind of being formed by life. That means it's kind of accumulate material. If it's motoric skill, if it's belief system, if it's emotional habits, that was kind of formed according to the surrounding, according to the relationship I had in my life. And in one point, it's getting, with time, it's getting more and more rigid, more and more fixated. And it's like impressions that I was kind of, we are built to receive impressions from birth, and those impressions getting deeper and deeper, and somehow they're creating a certain entity in us. And then later on in life, or kind of naturally during life, we get more and more identified with it, and identified with the story of who we are, in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it brings many questions. First of all, I think the whole process of identification is interesting there, isn't it? Can,
Definitely. And
can you
this
tell?
is bringing us to philosophy, which if you want, we can touch also. So far, I was trying to stay like strictly down to earth psychology, but when we get into philosophy, the question of identification becomes very important.
No, because from what you said, it seems like that this kind of chunk of impression that was building an entity, I believe that's me. And it's defining the way I see the world, the way I see myself, and it will define my relationship and my actions later on in life. And I think, as you said, and while you said it, I think also used the word, this kind of autopilot came up, and it's kind of a term for mindfulness. It seems like, we, whatever we're doing, we're not even aware of what's going on. We're just doing it and not in contact with the process of details of the motoric, of whatever going on. And we just have a kind of a narrative, like, because we're aware of a little chunk of ourselves, we're just like in touch with a little bit of what's going on and what does it mean to me as this entity, right?
So here is the point, that there are two things. One thing is to take the narrative which is not helpful and replace it by a narrative which is useful, but then we have to recognize it is still a narrative, you see? Just as we say that this narrative is false, and I want to replace it, the other narrative will also ultimately be false. It just will be more pleasant, it's more convenient. And this is what I said about philosophy. This is where philosophy enters, because ultimately, in our tradition, you want to abolish all narratives and you want to remain in the source, which is without any narrative. And I'm not sure this is the place to go deep into that. It is very subtle and subtle point and difficult to explain about it.
I know now we're entering into a huge subject, but I think it's unavoidable, because what you brought about the whole narrative and identification, in a way, it's come down to a very important question: who am I? And I know it's kind of a deep dive to go into it, but when we start talking about subconscious, I mean, we start seeing that we are very complex creatures that have kind of different levels that are all operating in the way we see the world, and the way we have, and also to the question, what kind of change is possible? Because in one hand, when we talk about, we accumulate impressions during our life, and they are forming all our way of organism. In a way, they are forming our nervous system, they are forming the brain, they are forming our reaction, they are forming, like you talk about, the tendency, the anger. I mean, that's one thing. Another thing, I don't know, maybe we came to the world with some tendencies, I had known nothing about it, but we know through science and through our understanding that we've been formed, and this is kind of, this entity is kind of defining how do we see the world. Now, I'm really asking myself the question, is like beginning to see it and understanding, maybe also change the understanding what is change. Is it about changing the tendencies, or about understanding more and more about what is me, who am I, what is life, and how that's kind of maybe changed the relationship between the different parts in me.
Yeah. The fundamental question of philosophy is, who am I? What is my real nature? And in this context, I would say right now that the conclusion is that I am not this physical body, and I am not also the mind. What we are talking about, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, this is not my identity. This is not who am I in reality. This is a false assumption. This is the result of ignorance that is causing me to identify with the physical body and the mind as my own self. On the other hand, my reality, my true self, is what we call consciousness. And in this regard, in our tradition, in our philosophy, there is a fundamental difference between thought and consciousness. I think in the establishment, if you can call it, and even in philosophies such as Buddhism, etc., consciousness is taken to be part of the mind. And in our system, the consciousness is not part of the mind, and I will demonstrate soon why we say it. But we say that consciousness is fundamental reality, is different than who am I, and my identification with the mind, thinking that this is who am I, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, that is the source of the ignorance that is ultimately bring about all the suffering that we are experiencing. And this consciousness, to put it simply, is the knower of the mind. Okay, so here is the mind. There are thoughts. Okay, who knows whom? Am I know? Let's say there is a thought form of a horse. I think about a horse. Okay, and now I'm asking. Okay, so what is the relationship between me and the thought horse? And the answer is that I am the knower of the thought of horse, and the thought is known by me. The thought doesn't know me, it is me who knows the thought. And if I know the thought and the thought doesn't know me, there cannot be identity between the two. You understand? If I know something and that something doesn't know me, it's not the same thing. We are two different things. There is the knower and there is the known. In this case, the thought is the known and I am the knower. So who is that knower? Is the knower another thought? We say no. The knower is not another thought because the other thought will also be known. By whom? By me. There is always the knower in relation to thought forms. All thoughts that we are aware of, we are aware of. They are the known. And I am, on the other hand, I am the knower of them, and therefore I am different. And to be able to distinguish between the knower and the known is the most fundamental inquiry that we do within our system to recognize this is not who am I. And the moment you establish this difference, this differentiation between myself and the mind, then the whole narrative is changing. Then the whole understanding of this whole stuff is changing. Now my identification with the mind is a silly mistake that I do. And being freed from this mistake is what will set me free, ultimately. You see, in the establishment, again, if we can call it in this way, consciousness is a product of brain activity, right? We know that we have the neurons and the synapses between the neurons generate that they fire and they create some chemical electrical activity, and enough neurons fire together, they create some experience. And therefore, most scientists will tell you that consciousness is generated by the brain, that the brain creates consciousness. Till today, nobody can tell how does it happen. Nobody knows. It is called the hard problem of consciousness. We don't know how consciousness is generated by the brain. In our philosophy, we say we will never know because it is not. Consciousness is not generated by the brain, and in some extreme cases, such as near-death experience, we can recognize that even though there is no brain activity, consciousness is there. And I don't want to get into this discussion and argument. This is not the point. The point is that in our system, consciousness is not the construct of the brain. It is something which is more fundamental for the brain, and the brain is like an apparatus that bringing about that consciousness which is present. A little bit like the way that a radio receiver is making radio waves audible. Right? Right now in your room there are radio waves, but you don't hear the radio. Why? Because there is no radio receiver. It's not able to take it and translate it into something audible. in a like manner, in a little similar way, we say that consciousness is constant, is permanent, it even doesn't change. When you mentioned about change, change is true for everything except for consciousness. But in order for that consciousness to manifest in this form of experience as we are having now, we need an apparatus such as the brain, okay? And in this way, we are making very clear distinction between consciousness and thoughts, and this is the main thing that I wanted to say. Be able to recognize the mental activity as the known and not as the knower, as an object and not as the subject. This is a big step into understanding the reality and ultimately working out with it.
I think now the last sentence you said something that is, for me, I think it's extremely valuable, that maybe understanding is the force that is so valuable for a radical change. It's kind of understanding. It's what can, in a way, drop this jumping from one narrative to another, from one imagination to another. It's to begin through, as you describe, a self-inquiry, and different traditions will describe it differently, but slowly grow up to see things as they are, facts. And by seeing, it's again, like you described, it's a relationship. I begin to see what I can see. That means any kind of form. So, and then slowly to understand that everything I can know, I can see, it's not me. And yeah. I have, but at the same time, I have no idea what sees. I mean, I can have ideas, I can have different tradition tells me what it's called, but in reality, I have no idea to know because it's outside of my knowledge, as I know knowledge. But at the same time, there is something else that can grow that comes with a taste of experience of something unknown. And I think, for me, understanding, it's such an interesting force that in one hand, it's kind of allowing to contain and be with what is, with what known. Sometimes it could be pleasant, sometimes it can, I mean, my faults, my tendencies, or whatever. And at the same time, it's to keep having fire, to know that there is something unknown that is kind of very, another language kind of inviting me to keep on in growing in understanding. And it seems like there is no limit to this understanding. You can grow more and more and more to see yourself as you are. And at the same time to see that you cannot know something which is actually very real inside of you. And this kind of new place, a new standing point, give a completely different perspective to what you know, with all the range of experience of life that gives the ups and downs. And so understanding, I feel that it's very interesting thing.
The subject of knowing and understanding is very big subject, and there's so much to say. It is true in our philosophy, the self or our real nature cannot be known as an object because you are the subject, you are the knower. And in order to know it as an object, you have to be other than yourself, which is a contradiction. You can never know it as an object, but you can know it by being it. Now, in this regard, I want to bring an analogy that will help to understand, because we say you cannot know the self in that manner. The way to think about it is a little bit like, I tell people, imagine that you dive into the ocean and you meet a deep water fish, a fish that lives in the depth and never come to the surface of the ocean. And you talk to this fish and you tell the fish, you know, you are swimming in water. And then the fish is asking you, really? Can you tell me more about water? He says, what do you mean? That's water. Everywhere around you is only water. But the fish says, can you show me? I don't see any water. Show me water. Where is water? And no matter how much you want to explain the fish about water, you have no way to do it, because the fish doesn't have any experience of waterlessness, anything other than water, and therefore it cannot experience water as something. You see, in all, if you really want the fish to understand water, you have to take it out of the water. You say, you see, this is no water. Now you put it back in the water, and immediately the fish will know the nature of water. In a similar manner, when we talk about consciousness, it is not that we need to know something which is above the clouds and we need to reach there and find out and recognize or whatever, somebody touch our forehead and we know the, no. Consciousness is like the water. It's like, it is right here, right now. It is everywhere, but I'm not recognizing it. I'm swimming in consciousness and I'm not recognizing it. So the way to be able to recognize it, to be right in that which is my nature in consciousness, is by stopping this identification with the body and the mind. This is the first step. But then it's very difficult to speak about it because our language is not built to deal with that which is beyond the external manifestation, but it is just abiding in the self. This is how we describe it. Abide in your true nature. You are just present in what is right here and right now, and you are in that. Actually, you are already in that. Everybody is in that. You cannot be other than that. But in order to be there with your realization, that takes something else. That takes something else. It is like the fish, first time going out of the water and realizing what water is.
It's for me, that's extremely fascinating, and I think that the realization that you know that I'm both a form in one hand and formless in another hand, and kind of have, like you said, saying that I can have a certain taste of the formless and then come back to be identified with form, and just, you know, slowly with time, and I don't know any magic wand, like you said, that can I don't know, make this process happen beside just accepting to live and having this kind of an urge to understand more about life, about myself, about the nature of things. And I think for me, it's this identification. I mean, because in one hand, I know it seems like there is something just around the corner, like you said, right here in the room. I mean, I can, if I'm listening, I can hear stillness in the back of all the noise of what's going on and information from the body. But it's a moment, and then I'm getting captured by my pain in the back, by the bills I need to pay, by the anger when I relate in my relationship, and it seems like this identification is taking place, and I'm gone. You know, I'm not there anymore to see, and I think here comes another thing that I wish you to say something about the process of remembering. What is it about remembering?
There is a question, common question about that realization that we talk about, whether it is a process or it is a moment. It is something that happens, and after that, in other words, can you go back to and forth between ignorance and knowledge, or once you know, it is over? And the answer is given in the famous analogy of the snake and the rope. When a person is walking and seeing in twilight in the evening, sees a snake by his legs, and he freezes with fear, he calls a friend to bring a flashlight, and when the friend comes and turns on the flashlight, he realizes it is not a snake, it is a rope. Okay, so where you imagine that there is a snake, where actually there is a rope. Okay, this is the famous analogy that we use in Vedanta to show that this world, as we perceive it, is like the snake, which is just an appearance, whereas the reality, the rope of it, is pure consciousness. Okay, it's maybe we will talk about the example of the movie and the screen, but the point is this. Let's say that you have this experience, you see the snake, you freeze, come with the flashlight, and you realize it is a rope. Now, the moment you know it is a rope, if you turn off the light, are you again going to imagine that it is a snake? No, you know already it is a rope. Even if you are not able to recognize, even if it appears like a snake, you know it is a rope. So knowledge is not something that you go back and either you know it is a snake or you know it is a rope. There is no also 50%. You know, it's not like I 50% know it as a rope and 50% know it. There is no such a thing. Either it is a snake or it is a rope. There is no other option. You know, and when we talk about self-realization, is like that. When we talk about this swinging that you have mentioned, this is still when we talk about snakes. It is like sometimes you are more afraid by the snake, sometimes you are less afraid, sometimes you understand that it may not be a snake. All these changes are, it is all snake game. But once you know it is a rope, there is no more question of snake. And in our case, once you realize your true nature as pure consciousness, you realize it, not you understand it and you think about it and you accept it philosophically. Once you realize it as your reality, there is no way back. It is it, you know it. Okay? Until then, we have to use our only tool or most powerful tool, which is our own mind. Fallible as it is, the mind is very limited. The mind is very small and have a lot of limitations, but this is the instrument we have. And with that, we work. And initially, we need what we call intellectual understanding. You were talking about understanding, but I want here again to make a distinction. There is intellectual understanding. Now we are talking and somebody listening and says, oh, maybe what the Swami says makes sense. And I really agree, it sounds very, this is understanding, but this will not solve your problems. It will not solve your problems. You're still in the same place, more or less. Okay? Then there is another understanding. There is understanding which is direct, which is in the present, which doesn't involve any words or any explanation. It's not a mental process. It is that which is born when the mind quiets down. When the mind goes away, you are present in that which is right here and right now. And this is an understanding which is not a process, which is not, it is different altogether. Okay? And therefore we have to make this distinction between understanding and understanding. And initially, we work with whatever we have, right? We can talk about some fantasy understanding that somebody may have in the Himalayas. We have to work with what I have a problem. I have COVID around me and I have to be careful and I have to provide for my family and I have to live in this world. I have to pay taxes. I have to go to the army or whatever. Down to earth, what do I do now? Okay, here are some tools, here are some instruments, work with it, do it. Understand its limitations, understand where you are going, and just go. And ultimately, you can transcend that and come into something which is much deeper and substantial, that will be much more effective also and powerful. Right now, start from exactly where you are.
And I think I would like to say more about what you described. There is understanding, there is understanding. I mean, I think we are conditioned in the West and in many places in the world to confuse knowledge and understanding. It's like reading many books and thinking we know that, even though it's just an expression of something. And some tradition talks about understanding is a combination between theory and practice. It's an effort. I mean, we cannot go around not doing a certain effort, because this journey, I mean, it needs to be really, like you said, back up in how do I live my life? How do I bring this kind of fire to learn about that, to learn about myself, to my everyday life? How do I can really be within myself in the midst of life, like you said? And can you talk from your experience, what I don't know, maybe it's not important as tools. What do you think is important for people, you know, like me, the regular guy from the West with the family and children and work and everything you described?
Yeah, there are different traditions that have different takes on this, and it is good because there are different temperaments of people that needs different things. We were talking about this understanding, studying, all this intellectual stuff. There are traditions who disregard it completely. For example, in the Bhakti tradition, the devotion tradition, they give less importance to intellectual understanding. In some Zen traditions, for example, they say, well, anyway, it is all false and all. Just sit and meditate, just do. Why are you so in your head, right? And in our tradition, on the other hand, we give a lot of importance also to this understanding, intellectual understanding, as a step, not as a means, not as an end, but as a means, something that can help us and push us forward. And in this sense, there are many traditions that apply and are relevant to different temperaments of people, and that is wonderful. Therefore, basically, people need to find what is the predominance, or what is the make, where do they feel comfortable? If a person is very active by nature and not very philosophical, sitting and studying scriptures and discussing philosophy will not be very helpful. Let them go and serve the sick and serve the people in distress and do something active. It is much more powerful. They will really get more benefit. Somebody who is very devotional in nature or has a lot of emotional work to do and want to divert it into devotion doesn't have much to do with discussions and analysis. Such a person needs to do devotional practice, to chant, to whatever. There are so many. Somebody who is more technical in nature may want to do hatha yoga, for example. We have sit and do pranayama, asana, all these things work on the mind in a very mechanical way. It works for many people, and people who are more philosophical by nature will find more attractive the philosophy traditions. And in this sense, there is no one set of advices that is true for everybody. Find out, just first of all, have the interest to grow, to progress, and make a commitment to do whatever it takes to walk the walk, and then start to move around and see like what different traditions offer, and where do you find yourself transformed. You see, a person may sit and listen to our talk right now and may be very inspired and wants to just move on and do things and grow. And another person, not less spiritual or whatever, is listening to the lecture, but it's not touching because that person is devotional. Why do I need all this mental noise? It doesn't bother me. It's just let me sing, let me chant, let me love my Lord, let me whatever. And therefore, I think that a person who is starting the path should have different experiences in different traditions and see where the heart is pointing, but never stop. Never stop. And understand on the spiritual path, like in any path, there are ups and downs. There are falls, and every time we fall, we have to stand up. That's the only rule. That's the only rule. If you make a mistake, correct it. If you fall, get up and continue. Nothing else. If you do that, ultimately you will find your own way, and you will be reassured that you are going the right direction. You know, I always say people are very worried. Maybe I'm choosing the wrong path. Maybe my teacher is not enlightened. And if you do your spiritual quest sincerely, even if you go the wrong way, so to say, you are actually planting the seeds, the right seeds for getting in the right direction. You understand what I mean? Well, we believe in the law of karma. We say that the reason you hit up on a false teacher or on that is something to do with your past karma, something not so good you did in the past, and now you go in the wrong direction. But the very effort to do the right thing, to go in the right direction, is planting the seeds for the future to hit the right path. And therefore, don't worry. Don't ask yourself 100 times, is my teacher is right? Is it wrong? Is it good for me? Maybe I should go to the other. No, you just be up and doing, sincerely try to do your level best, and you are assured to go in the right direction.
I kind of want to come back to the beginning, because I mean, I don't think we need to elaborate more, but I don't know what spiritual work is. For me, it's a practical work. As we came back, you know, the whole study of myself, subconscious and conscious, and it's a practicality. That's my life, and the way I am with myself got to do with the way I am with the people I love, with the surrounding, and it has a huge. This is life. So I think this investment in kind of open up to read my book, and in a way it's the book of humanity. In a way we're not that different from each other, even though in some levels we are. It seems to me that it's a necessity, and I hope that whatever will inspire people will help them to realize that, you know, there is no success or not success. There is just intention in this practicality, like you said, and this intention to start to explore and to search for all the help that give inspiration in that direction. When you say that?
In English, the word spirituality is coming from the word spirit, which is something amorphic we most of us don't believe in, and we don't know even what it means. And therefore, when we say spirituality, it is so fuzzy. In Sanskrit, the word, the translation for spirituality is adhyatmika. And that makes it very clear. Adhyatmika means that which pertains to the self. That which take you to your true nature, to the self, is spiritual. Whatever is revealing the reality, the truth, is spiritual. It can be physics and biology. It doesn't matter. If it is actually taking you closer to your who you are in reality, to true nature, it is spiritual. And anything that takes you away from your true nature, away from your who you are, from the realization of your reality, that is the opposite of spirituality. Therefore, I find it beautiful in Sanskrit. It's very simple. You want to know if something is spiritual. That is it taking you closer to who you really are? It is spiritual. If it is rooting you deeper in ignorance, it is not spiritual. It's that simple.
And I think it's beautifully put, and especially when in some way it's a paradox, because the closer you get to yourself, the closer you are to your surrounding, because like you said, it seems like there is part of us that is impersonal. It's not Shlomi, it's not kind of the body, and in a way it's kind of getting, without faking I don't know, there's a lot of buzzword, compassion, and to serve other. I think it could be a lot in the head, and unless, like you talked before, realization of, I mean, what is it that keep me separated from the surrounding? The more I closer deeper to myself, maybe I can see some kind of illusions that keep me identified with this difference between me and you or whatever. And that, I think it's so valuable and important in our times.
Yeah, this idea of the self, of knowing your true nature and coming in touch with yourself, is the most unselfish thing. There is a lot of confusion about it. People say, yeah, but it is so selfish because you take care of yourself. What about others? But the truth is, in this philosophy at least, the truth is that there is no other. The other is my own self. The other is another expression of my own self. Of course, we don't have the time now to explain this in depth, but this is the conclusion, that there is no other. What I take to be another is only the result of my ignorance, of my identification with the body and the mind, and therefore everything which is not the body and the mind is other. Whereas to know my true nature as consciousness is realizing that consciousness is the fundamental reality, and what I take to be another is not really another. It is another expression of myself. It is another expression of the same consciousness. And it manifests in the form of compassion, in the form of service. When I recognize that you are extension of myself, when I really recognize that consciousness which is myself is manifesting as you, then the natural expression is service. Is service, because I'm serving my own self in everybody.
And I think it's important, I mean, when we talk, you know, for me, it seems like, you know, there's different levels. And I feel, you know, we're kind of moving in different levels. I want to come back to one level of kind of put in words what you're saying right now. Again, if we take an example of a family life, of relationship, the more I see that the subconscious, like we started as an entity, I was formed by life, and without knowing, this is kind of the way I receive and then deciding how I react to the situation. The more I kind of take responsibility and come closer to myself with my wish to learn, with my attention, with some kind of effort that we talk, it could be different from people, then I begin to see that I'm never alone. The way I am affect my children, my relationship. And even though something in me really know that I love the people I love, but there is something that comes in the way, and automatically go into this kind of patterns of behavior that I know that it's not what I want to do. But so the whole process of coming back to myself in a practical way, it's investment in the people you love, in relationship, and in the atmosphere of wherever you live. And I feel that if not anything else that can call us to this path, that might do the job, because I'm convinced that we all want to express and to be able to be the best version of ourselves, or the most loving version with the loved ones. And this is kind of to come back to the subconscious and the need to get to know the language and the way my parts communicate in receiving the world.
100%. At the end of the day, it's all about relationships. It's all about relationships with our partners, with our families, with our friends, with the old lady in the street, with the bus driver. Life is all about relationships. Everything else is just the peanuts, you know? And maybe last thing I want to say, you mentioned about being alone. We make a distinction between aloneness and loneliness. You know, these are the very opposite. You know, loneliness is when you see yourself as separate and distinct, and you are excluded, and you have insecurity, and you have to guard yourself from the dangers outside. And sometimes people are lonely in the midst of their families and friends. They are surrounded by family members and friends, and they are lonely because they see themselves as a different, separate entity, unit, insecure, threatened by so many factors, and that can be very painful. And it doesn't matter if you are surrounded by loving people, you can be lonely. Aloneness is recognizing that you are, it is the one. When there is only one, it is alone. It is not lonely, but it is alone. And when that is, then if I alone am, if I alone is, then everything is myself. And there cannot be loneliness. It is the very opposite. In this sense, aloneness is the completeness, is to be complete with everything. And this is the ultimate goal. You know, in yoga tradition, the ultimate achievement is called Kaivalya. Maybe you have heard Patanjali, the Yoga Sutra is talking about Kaivalya. Kaivalya, Kevala means one, alone. Kaivalya means aloneness. It is one translation. It is the completeness of reality, which is one. When I am this, I am in myself. And so aloneness is like the ultimate. Loneliness is the most remote from that. Is when I completely disconnect from myself and from everything else, I feel lonely. So maybe we can bless ourselves and others to find this aloneness and abide in it.
Yes, I think that that's a beautiful way to, I feel, to end this conversation. Again, a lot of material, and thank you so much,
Happy
Swamiji.
to be here. Happy to be here as always. Yeah.
And until next time, maybe.
Yeah, anytime, anytime.
Thank you so much.
I'm making sure not to be a busy man.
A simple man.
Oh yeah, yeah. Trying to be more simple. So,
Thank you.
right. Lovely to be here with you.
We see you.
Bye bye.